topic is Mamluk War and Peace from 1250 to 1510. Born into cavalry and raised to be soldiers from childhood, the Mamluk fighting force carried the stamp of something made with care and tempered throughout the years, cultivated to be skillful and powerful. Mamluk leadership was characterized by an incredible aptitude for attack and also for negotiation, ruled by the philosophy of realpolitik but surging with the heart of tradition, religious dedication, and the pride of a warrior class previously enslaved. From the rise of Babar to the attack of the Ottomans, the Mamluks forged an impressive empire which defeated the Mongols, conquered Frankish states, and reached its height through military practices and smart, targeted negotiation. The Mamluks declined once their military tradition was changed in the Circassian period, and ultimately it was their military's inability to adapt which led to their collapse with the Ottomans' deciding blow. The catalyst of the Mamluks' rise to independence, and an excellent example of their military's power, occurred with King Louis IX of France's attack on Egypt. He believed that he could use control of Egypt as a gateway into control of the Holy Lands. In 1249, he led 20,000 men up the Nile, where the Mamluks gave him a bloody greeting and he was forced to retreat. His troops starving and beaten, he was soon captured and ransomed. The Mamluks had acted under military commander Babar since the Sultanate was in turmoil. Flushed with the success of the battle, they forced the woman who had taken over as Sultan to marry a Mamluk soldier, thereby securing authority in Mamluk hands. After the independent Mamluk state broke free in 1250, after crushing the Crusader attack on Egypt, Babar became the first leader to stabilize the state, ruling from 1260 to 1277. He created a centralized government based out of Cairo, altered and established judicial procedures, and set a soaring precedent of territorial conquest. He once boasted that he could play polo in Cairo and Damascus within the space of a single week. His reign ushered in the Bahri period in Mamluk history, which ended in 1382 to the Burji or Circassian period. Babar was more than a sultan and a skilled war leader. To his people, he was a symbol of the strength and liberation a slave class could attain. He became the standard that other Mamluk leaders aspired to. Arguably his most impressive accomplishment, apart from taking over leadership in Egypt and slaying Louis's cavalry, was his defeat of the Mongols. He led the first opposition to triumph over the Mongols since the famed Kublai Khan had come to power. In 1259, the Mongols sent messengers to Qutuz, the acting sultan in Egypt, requesting his capitulation. Instead, Qutuz killed them and mounted their severed heads at the city gates. He informed Babar of their visit and met him in Syria with troops. They feigned retreat to isolate the Mongol unit, then surrounded them on three sides and prevented their escape with fire. On the ride back from their successful battle, Babar murdered Qutuz and officially declared himself sultan. He did not stop there. Throughout his career, he used Syrian assassins, those who made it through Mamluk takeover alive, to wipe out any threats to his power within the Mamluk state and elsewhere. Babar is often cited as the most ruthless of the Mamluk sultanates, but his policies were logical in the earlier stages of empire building and include diplomatic relations as well as military acuity. Under his rule, harbors and trade were expanded, internal communication was improved through a postal system, and a priority was placed on state building in Egypt and Syria over further expansion. He employed diplomacy in his dealings with Italian coastal states, especially Sicily, because trade brought in important products and slaves. Furthermore, he dropped ambitions for Anatolia and Iraq when he realized that his state lacked the resources. Babar's was undoubtedly a skilled sultan, but his success was due in large part to the Mamluk warrior class he had command of. A Mamluk soldier's military career was ideally intensive and began at a young age. This cavalry's combination of horsemanship, weaponry, and training was most likely the factor which allowed them to expel the Mongol army from Syria and to continue to launch attacks on them until around 1303, when they became less of a threat as they converted to Islam and sifted more deeply into Persian society. He would be taught the Fursiya, a word made up of three elements: the Ulum, which is science, the Funun, which is arts, the Adab, literature, of cavalry skills. The Fursiya text addressed elements of battle and strategy, with an important emphasis on qualities also valued by the Quran and the Teutonic Knights, qualities that medieval warriors would have striven for. The text also focused on the soldier's use of horses. It described how care for the horses and how to use them in action, as well as how to treat injuries soldiers or their quadrupeds might face. These animals were either Arabian or a mix of Arabian and pack steed, which made them tough and well adapted to rough conditions. The Mamluks commonly practiced their battle skills and horsemanship by playing in the hippodrome Babar's constructed in Cairo, focusing on agility, mounted attacks with weapons and bows, speed, and command. They also used these arenas to divide into smaller military units in which they were trained with their comrades in moving as one and attacking in unison. They gained further experience and boosted morale under Babar's reign by raiding Mongol territory, a practice that helped to deplete Mongol resources and discourage their goal of Syrian reoccupation. In fact, according to Watterson, Islamic success against the Mongols was founded on the military abilities of the Mamluks, but it was the Mamluk statecraft that ultimately defeated the invaders. Egypt's resources were devoted to building and training the army for Syria, which was always mobilized at the slightest provocation from the Mongols. The Mamluks possessed a deadly combination of state and military power. The military component was robust for unique reasons. Their weapons and their strategies are inherently linked and therefore must be examined together. The Mamluk arsenal consisted of bows and arrows, which allowed them to attack at a distance. They would surround the enemy or fence them in using fire, attacking from multiple fronts. They also had clubs and axes to battle at close range, and heavy armor formed the second skin of both the men and their horses. This time period was marked by beautiful achievements in Mamluk art and architecture, which was evident in metalwork as well. The kinds of details and inscriptions which would have been found on pots, lamps, basins, and other common items laced shields and armor. Their dedication to their craft of war was the final immeasurable tool at their disposal. They were trained in barracks away from their families, where their identities formed around their units, and after 1250 around the fact that they had won their independence. They usually fought not far from their homes, and were passionate about Muslim doctrine. One inscription found on a suit of armor reads, "Father of the poor and miserable, killer of the believers and unbelievers and polytheists, reviver of justice among all." In contrast, the Mongolian army was not formally trained. Their weapons were heavier, made on a smaller scale, and for closely range use. They fought for booty and imperial interests rather than coherent ideological purposes. Their horse and battle strategies, however, were effective and utilized the tools that they had. They rode Stepland ponies, which they had huge numbers of, and were able to replace constantly mid-fight in order to remain fast and energetic. However, both armies kept reserve horses at the ready. The Mongols assaulted their enemies with a barrage of close and constant injuries, which exhausted them and whittled their forces down. The Mamluks were able to defeat them at a cost, but on a consistent basis, by using their larger horses and farther range capabilities to isolate them in a concerted effort, sometimes using fire to trap them or to drive them back at full gallop. They were clearly skilled in their strategy rather than merely gifted with bigger horses. It has even been suggested that the Mongols had less of a disadvantage than has been suggested in traditional literature. According to Amitai, by this time the Mongols would have had well-developed weapons produced by skilled urban craftsmen, found in their sprawling and powerful empire. They also would have had access to horses stolen from other states, such as Syria and Armenia, although there is no proof that they began breeding or using these horses in place of the ponies they had been using since their rise as nomads. Although the Mamluks probably benefited from larger, more deadly weaponry and better defense with their armor, they defeated the Mongols and were able to keep them out of Syria and the Levant through clever strategies and careful training, mounting offensive campaigns that other states could not and did not produce. The Mamluks were also active in their pursuit of the Christian land and control of trade. They used realistic strategies, but the army and sultan were driven by the memories of past conflict as well as by the Muslim idea of holy war. Revenge was a major motivator. Babar captured Antioch in 1268 and sent troops armed with relatively close combat weaponry to raid Armenian Cilicia. As this raid and the policies following it would suggest, the Armenian cities were of use to the Mamluks more as a strategic border between them and the Mongols and as a trade center than for imperial conquest. The raid was likely about gathering booty and securing psychological authority, rather than exacting damage or usurping territory. The Armenians shared borders with both the Mamluks and the Mongols, and were paying high tribute rates to the Mongols already. This made them very willing to negotiate with the Mamluks, fearful that they were unable economically to recover if they were ever attacked in a full-on siege. Additionally, the Mamluks were preoccupied with their ongoing occupations and campaigns against the Frankish Christians and the Mongols elsewhere, and were weary of inciting the Mongol wrath by attacking the Armenians unnecessarily, for the Mongols provided some protection and loyalty in exchange for Armenian taxes. In short, the border of the Armenian kingdom was beneficial for all under the circumstances and provided an incentive for diplomacy rather than force. Sultan Kalaman was quicker to enter into treaties with Christian states than the Babars had been, and repeatedly revealed an eye for the easiest and most profitable option, which often meant trade negotiations rather than battle. In 1285, Sultan Kalaman agreed to a treaty with Armenian King Luan II, which stated that the Armenians would not undertake any fortification projects, would not ally themselves against Mamluks with the Mongols that had sometimes posed a problem in the actions of other Christian states, and would pay a tribute of 500,000 dirhams per year. The Kalawans Sung and King Hetem continued negotiating these arrangements, as did Al-Malik al-Ashraf, the next Kalawan descendant and sultan. In June of 1292, al-Ashraf attacked the Armenian church where the Catholicos presided in Euphrates. They captured the Catholicos and renamed the enclave Castle of the Muslims, or Qalat al-Muslimin. The The Sultan was energized by recent territorial acquisitions from Frankish states and sought a legacy to compare with Babar. Overall, he sought the riches of the Armenian kingdom. When he arrived at Cilicia, an important trade center for trade in the late 13th century, his emirs, political advisors who controlled specific military units, had advised him to again attack. However, the king presented his riches upon their meeting, and most likely privately offered the emirs rewards to keep the peace, and proposed to double the amount of the tribute he had been paying since the treaty. The emirs changed their minds, and all Ashrafs changed with them. The two states agreed to another treaty with additional provisions. The Armenian king would surrender 3 border fortresses. This exchange illustrates the powerlessness of the Armenians, pulled in one direction by the Mongols and another by the Mamluks. The arrangement was extremely advantageous for Al-Ashraf. His people gained access to important trading ports, and wealth streamed in from their peaceful relationship. Although they were an imperially ambitious empire fighting on many other fronts, they had little incentive to kill the goose that was laying them such large silver eggs so regularly. Raids, leadership complications, and this economic burden all contributed to the Armenian fall, so that by 1375, the Mamluks finally captured Cilicia and with it King Luan V. Treaties and diplomacy played an invaluable role in Mamluk success with the Frankish states during the Bahari period. Under Babar, treaties or huda had been avoided out of military ambition as well as Muslim sentiment, which was that Christianity and Islam were two necessary and perpetually hostile domains. But successor sultans such as Kalawan saw that this policy in an expanding and already conflict-ridden empire was no longer pragmatic. These huda were truces that lasted for predetermined periods of between 4 and 10 years. The Mamluks leveled truces with Acre, Tyre, and Tripoli, among others, mostly in the form of trade and commercial protections to safeguard the prosperity their army needed. Then in 1290, one of those truces was breached, leading to one of the most significant Mamluk conquests in Christendom. A group of Franks and Muslims had been drinking in a tavern in Acre, a Christian coastal state situated between Damascus and Jerusalem, when fighting broke out between them. Frankish officials stepped in and hung the Muslims, later explaining that they had meant only to hang the Franks as punishment. A section of the treaty provided that the merchants, the ambassadors, and those going to and fro shall be safe and protected by the two parties in traveling, residing, going, and coming. The Franks had killed Muslim merchants, breaking the treaty. Mamluk forces mobilized and seized Acre in 1291, securing the last of the small crusader states. So far, these have been achievements of the Bahari period. The scholarly consensus is that the Circassian period was the beginning of the downhill roll for the Mamluk Sultanate, from the Sultan Barkuk in 1382 to Ottoman rule in 1516. The reasons for this are varied, but most important is that military tradition had been maintained under Turkish rule and was dethroned by the Circassians, who selected political leaders and soldiers based on race rather than skill. To be clear, sultans had always been chosen based on heredity, but their military positions were not. Consequently, not only did political unrest increase over new sultans, but also the army became less specialized and lost one of its most distinguishing qualities. A race-preoccupied state also increased civil protest, partially because many Jews and Christians held political office. Although tension had existed between the Turks and the minority religions in their territory, they were pressed more harshly as the years went by. Under the Circassians, Christians and Jews were required to wear heavy necklaces with either a cross or a ball attached as identification. Although internal discord and economic deterioration were important factors in Mamluk decline over the Circassian period, neither is likely the main cause. Such fragility can be attributed at the root to the state of the soldier population and of the Sultanate's lack of skill, both of which have been linked fundamentally in Mamluk history through military practices. The Mamluks of the Ayyubid era were handpicked, replaced individually at the end of each generation, and chose their leaders based on demonstrated skill in battle. This system was more than a method, it was the backbone of the state. The new pattern based on descent watered down the Mamluk army. Furthermore, the plague ravaged the population and impacted morale of those who were left. The empire failed to establish the necessary treaties and trading policies with the Bedouins, which put a strain on economic life. Therefore, when Turks led by Timur Lenk attacked Syria in 1400, the Mamluks were unable to defend themselves and their land was lost. Bars Bey's conquest of Cyprus in 1426 represented a significant gain for the empire, but was the last real successful expansion attempt before the Portuguese disrupted trade in the Red Sea in 1500, followed by the Ottoman encroachment into Syria and Egypt in 1500. By this time, the Circassian Muslim state had been chewed up slowly from the inside due to unproductive economic policies, disease, and most prominently the empire's weakened bustle. The Ottoman Janissaries under King Selim seized Cairo in 1517. After remaining in control of Syria and Egypt for 250 years, the Mamluks finally met their match. Both the Mamluks and the Janissaries had Turkish origins, characterized by self-patience, self-denial, and thrift in the eyes of the Christian world. Where the Mamluks had succeeded against the Mongols, largely due to their longer range weaponry and well-trained soldiers, now the Janissaries had the upper hand for similar reasons. They were trained for battle from a young age and formed a cavalry at the state's disposal. They used artillery weapons, which the Mamluks failed to adopt, clinging to the older technology they had used for centuries. The Mamluks did not disappear, however, and in fact they were not even subsumed by the Ottoman state. Mamluk political leaders often remained in power and were able to maintain smaller private infantries. Thus the Mamluk Empire surged up through Egyptian ranks using military strength, and a Mamluk fighter sultan triumphed over crusaders in Christian city-states through adroit, well-coordinated military effort and maintained a flow of wealth and stability through diplomacy with key states such as Armenia. Their training and prowess on the battlefield were augmented by sturdy horses and advanced weaponry, allowing them to suppress the Mongols and oust their control of Syria. Once their system of training fell slowly apart in the Circassian period, the Ottomans were able to seize Syria and Egypt. The Mamluks fell into subordinate positions, but not after centuries of accomplishing more than many slave castes could have imagined.